Deltarune's Knight is a character that the community has been debating about since Chapter 2, mainly because we learn Jack about them in Chapter 1. There used to be lots of possibilities until we saw the Roaring Knight and disproved most theories. That being said, there are some characters you could still make a case for. So, what is the point of this video? Well, aside from the two main picks, I will give evidence for 5 other characters to be the knight, which makes a total of 7 characters. I also have some insane theory about the knight which I will tell after all the other characters. So, enough stalling for time, let's talk about the Roaring Knight and who it is. Starting off, before we can talk about who the Roaring Knight is, we need to know what the Roaring Knight is. As I said previously, the knight is mentioned in Chapter 1. But there are 3 characters and those 3 characters don't give much information. Those characters are Seem, Jevil and King. Based on what they say, the knight seems to be a horrible force of nature, which would explain why King is on the knight's side. In Chapter 2, we learn a lot more about the knight. The first mention is from Sweet, K-Pen and Cakes. They talk about how the knight created a dark world and how it changed Queen. Our next mention is this room with the swatchlings. They mention Queen being obsessed over this video, possibly because she wanted Noelle making a fountain. And while she has Noelle captured, she says the Roaring Knight made the fountain and then left. We also learned how dark fountains are made. All of this information was enough for theories to be made about the knight. So, what happened to these theories when Chapter 3 was released? Yep, the Roaring Knight appeared with its antlers. This has led to the main 2 theories we have now. But I believe there is room for some other characters to be the knight. And that is one of the 2 reasons I made this video. Anyways, how will this work? Well, I'll be going in the order of least likely to most likely. Then, I'll go over the evidence proving and disproving them being the knight. Once I'm done, I'll rate them on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being the least likely and 10 being the most likely. So, it's time we finally talk about who is the Roaring Knight. Starting off, the first character, Aku, the least likely character I think has a chance of being the knight, is Alvin. Now, to get the elephant out of the room, Alvin and many other characters mentioned in this video don't have antlers and the knight clearly has antlers. Now, for most of these characters, I'll argue that the Dark World gives them antlers, like how Susie has a tail in the Dark World. But I'll be less likely to believe that they are the knight. Anyways, Alvin doesn't match the knight's other attributes, so he's already off to a bad start. As for motive, Alvin wants to be on the path to the angel and also wants his dad to be resurrected. Now, he can make the dark worlds of the church, the school and the library and probably knows where Chris lives. So, with all of this evidence, you might think, why is he not the knight? Well, for starters, he doesn't want anything to do with the shelter. Furthermore, it would be weird to not have the first dark world be the church. The final nail in the coffin is that I doubt he would hurt someone like Susie, and besides, he doesn't seem to have a sword of sorts, so he can't even create a dark world. So, I give Alvin a 1 out of 10 because he doesn't even look like the knight. The next character I'm mentioning is W. Diddy Gaster. Now, this is probably the first time you've seen a knight theory where Gaster has a low chance to be the knight, along with Alvin, but unlike Alvin, Gaster has better evidence. Though this does still have plenty of flaws which we'll get into later. The first major piece of evidence is with the knight's hands. Now, look at this picture of the knight's and Gaster's hands. Seems similar. If not, then how about now? Yeah, I thought so. Now, while he has none of the other knight's features, he does have a good motive. You see, while Deltarune is a story, it is also a game and, like most games, the characters all think of their world as a real one. But think of something like Doki Doki Literature Club or In Stars and Time. Those games, while seeming to have nothing in common, do share something similar. Characters who know they're in a game. Now, in Deltarune there are a few characters who seem to know about this, but the one with the most knowledge about our world's existence is Gaster, who might be creating dark worlds for his Deltarune. In terms of opportunity, I feel like the only dark world Gaster could have created is the shelter. This is because of his form, I mean he's a goner for sure. So, I give Gaster a 3 out of 10 because he only has one of the knight's attributes, does have a motive but has a bad opportunity to make most of the dark worlds. Now, we have the character who has a lot of evidence proving he's the knight, but also a lot of evidence disproving him being the knight. That's right, it's Rudy Holiday. So, out of all the characters he already has a good chance since he has antlers. Though he doesn't have any of the other attributes. As for everything else, there are already 2 other videos that go into great detail about him being the knight, which I recommend watching if you want to know more about this theory. Also, as a side note, any other character who has plenty of evidence on them being the knight I won't mention in too much detail. But do want to mention the best piece of evidence for Rudy being the knight and the best piece of evidence for him not being the knight. The best piece of evidence is the antlers, but if we don't include that, I'd say it's a line of him saying he'd kick Susie's butt. This is because he does exactly that. In fact, if you beat him, he swoons Susie first. Now, the best piece of evidence debunking him is the fact he's too much of the nice character. Furthermore, if list theory is correct, then he's most likely going to die and be resurrected in a dark world at some point. So, I give Rudy a 5 out of 10 because I see him as having an equal amount of evidence proving and disproving him being the knight. Now, time for the character who's usually a joke option, but he does actually have quite a lot of evidence for him being the knight. That's right, it's none other than the great Papyrus himself. Now, as you all know, Papyrus has a very skeleton-like body, which makes sense since he's a skeleton. But you know who does have a skeleton-like body but isn't confirmed to be a skeleton? That's right, the Roaring Knight. Now, while this could be another skeleton, I am convinced Toby added this to make us think of Papyrus and maybe even have it be him. Now, out of all the characters, Papyrus has a good motivation with him either being manipulated by some greater evil or being one of the most ambitious characters in all of fiction. As for opportunity, the knight isn't present in the first 2 chapters, but appears in chapters 3 and 4. You know who doesn't seem to be present in chapters 3 and 4? That's right, Papyrus. Also, both the knight and Papyrus can fly. So, I give Papyrus a 7 out of 10 since it would be interesting to have an evil Papyrus and it could explain more about the Skeleton Brothers. Now, we've finally reached the top 3 contenders. So, who do I think is the most likely character to be the knight? Well, this option will be a surprise to all since I've barely seen them talked about being the Roaring Knight. So, who is it? Well, I think it's a Mad Dummy. Starting off, Mad Dummy is a ghost that can possess anything. So, they could possess a suit that looks like the knight and all of the knight's features could just be one massive red herring. As for motive, Mad Dummy is mad and could be so mad they want the world to be destroyed. In terms of opportunity, Mad Dummy is like Papyrus because they are only present in the first 2 chapters. Now, my only problem with Mad Dummy being the knight is the fact they aren't really an important character in Deltarune or in Undertale, so if we ended up seeing the Mad Dummy being the knight, we wouldn't lose our minds over it, unless you have extreme Deltarune knowledge like me. So, I give Mad Dummy an 8 out of 10 because they have the best evidence so far but aren't really important nor hinted to be important, so it wouldn't work as a great twist. Now, we have the final 2 and as most of you have probably guessed, the 2 most likely characters to be the knight are Carol and Dis. But, which one has a better chance to be the knight? Now, you're probably going to kill me for saying this, but I think Carol has a better chance than Dis at being the knight. Now, let's go over why Carol has a better chance than Dis at being the knight. Firstly, I think I should debunk some reasons for Dis being the knight. Firstly, the whole left-handed argument is stupid because she doesn't seem to be the only character who's left-handed. Then, there's her weapon being the bat. The problem with this is the fact a bat cannot be used to be stabbed into the ground. The last thing I want to debunk is the theory of Dis being some undead monster. If that were the case, then why would she be the one to be creating all these dark fountains, especially if Noelle likes Susie? Furthermore, she seems to be trapped in the code, so I don't understand why she would be possessing the night if she's stuck somewhere. Maybe she has some sort of pyrovision, but I doubt it. Now, time for me to explain why Carol has a better chance at being the knight. Now, we all know about the reasons why she can be the knight, but I'm going to debunk some reasons for why can't be the knight. The first is her being nowhere near the church. Well, in this chapter we see Sense teleport, so it's possible she can as well. Furthermore, Sense bleeds and Carol has some unused bleeding sprites which could be from her helmet being taken off. The icing on the cake is the fact she is a cold-hearted character, and cold is similar to dark because they both have an absence. The knight seems to have an absence of a personality, so this connection could be made with Carol. So, I give both Carol and Dis a 9 out of 10 because they both have a really good chance to be the knight, but Carol has some more interesting evidence to make her the knight. So, that's the end of the video. But wait, if you remember what I said about earlier, you'd know that I was going to mention my crazy knight theory. Well, I'll give it to you. I think the knight is not anyone I mentioned, but rather an amalgamation of them, some of them. So, who makes up the amalgamates? Well, which 3 characters have I mentioned that could be dead? Well, the obvious one would be Dis, the one who could be dead is Gaster, and the last one who is somewhat dead, Papyrus. Now, I want you to read this line. Papyrus says if you kill him on a neutral run. Now, while he does die in a neutral run and also does say this in a genocide run, maybe due to it being a bit, but what if he once only lived with a head? In fact, if he's alive, Gaster could also be alive. Now, you may be wondering why these 3 characters. Well, look at the knight's design. The antlers, the skeleton-shaped body, and the Gaster hands. Now, Gaster speaks in hands, but who says he speaks with those hands? Also, keep in mind deltarune is supposed to parallel Undertale. Now, if you've watched a certain suck, you have heard the statement of Flowey being an amalgamate. Well, what if it's a similar situation, but there's more of an amalgam than he is? Now, the amalgams do move slowly, but they can also move fast. Now, it's time for the last piece of evidence. This mysterious character on the phone. At first you may think it's Carol, but why would she be speaking like this and be speaking differently on the weird route? Now, you may be thinking of this line on screen, but what if the knight will be right at the church since it was supposed to be tonight? And then, at the end, when we finally do get a knight reveal, it won't be some Scooby-Doo mask off, but rather a messed up body from multiple monsters. So, that's where my theory ends. Now, there are probably some holes in my crack theory, and if they are, let me know and I might do a response video. Anyways, I'm taking a little break from working on video for a week, but I'll make some shorts. Also, I plan to make some Undertale theories since this is an Undertale channel. So there won't be any deltarune videos until August 31st.